What's it called? Because what's it called? Because on my desktop I don't have a speaker, so it actually won't mess with me that much. You just made it econ. You just made it econ T with Josh Bedi, huh? Oh, dude, that's perfect. It's short and sweet. Oh, dude, what's it called? Because yeah, me neither. Me neither. So I don't even, Although, dude, a cool thing about this, man, and is I got an email a couple days ago. Maybe because you were downloading it, it was like in the top 10 most downloaded papers in the public choice category on SSRN. Apparently, they only yeah, for that day, for that specific day, it was like the 16th. Apparently, it only takes 16 downloads. So yeah, yeah, I've already proposed. Yeah, I'm a candidate. I think I've gotten the email. Yeah, I'm a candidate. I think I've been twice, maybe even three times. Because this is my fourth year, right? Yeah, so I think I've been three times. That was the first time we met though, because I think we're in different cohorts. So I didn't really, and like I don't see you on campus that much either. So yeah, yeah. I actually knew you for a while before I even realized you were in the program too. So yeah, you meet so many cool people too, obviously. So that's awesome too. Yeah, yeah, it's forthcoming in 2021 at Cosmos and Taxis. Okay, cool. Well, why economics? I guess I didn't even know what economics was until my senior year of high school, and it started out. I was just good at it. I mean, I was a good student in general, but I was better at economics than I was at everything else, and it was one of those. It was one of those subjects where you were either really good at it or you were really bad at it, and so I excelled. I liked it. It was intuitive. I liked all the graphs, and so I went into Mississippi State into the econ program, knowing I like it, I'm good at it, and it happens to pay well. So why not go in? And I didn't know I didn't plan on going into academia at first, but then I met a couple people at Mississippi State, Claudia Williamson, Travis Wiseman, a couple people, uh, and kind of like-minded people. Like I've always been very libertarian, and libertarianism is kind of a very good complement to Austrian economics. And so once I put those two together, I got even more interested in pursuing academia. And yeah, at some point, just sat down with the advisor, and I was like, yeah, I want to keep doing this. Uh, and then public choice always interested me. because a lot of people, at least before I knew about public choice, a lot of people seem to be try to dichotomize politics with economics. And so public choice is a cool way to just, I mean, politics is almost essentially the same thing as economics, right? I mean, economics is kind of ubiquitous, and political actors make choices too. And just like Austrian economics is a complement to libertarianism, so is public choice. And in fact, I think I see public choice and Austrian economics as two sides of the same coin. One's talking about efficiency arguments against government, the other's talking about incentive arguments against government, right? So, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I had no idea about GMU for a while, but like I said, some of those professors that I had, like Claudia Williamson and Travis Wiseman, they told me about GMU, and I did a little bit of research on it, and found out it would be a good fit. There were a couple times at Mississippi State that I did some IHS seminars, and that was a really cool, I guess, putting my foot in the door, kind of thing. So yeah. I mean, and it's awesome because we have a PhD. Not a PhD. We have a Nobel Prize winner. James Buchanan, and that's something that I think people kind of discount. I don't think people realize the weight of that sometimes. In fact, we have two. There's Vernon Smith too for experimental. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Which is very similar. Which is very similar to what Kaplan does when he calls irrationality, rational irrationality, right? I mean, it's irrationality, but it's there for a very good reason, and it's price theoretic, that reason. So, mhm, yeah, the other is Austrian. I thought, I'm at GMU, I might as well do what GMU does. I mean, take advantage of it. So awesome, yeah, man. Great minds think alike. No, it's not a hack at all. It's not a hack at all. Yeah, sure. Yeah, man. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So this is very much like a side project. It's not part of my dissertation. My dissertation's on immigration, but I was just I actually came up with this idea. I was riding a motorcycle, man. I was riding across country, and I was thinking about something that Peter Leeson had told me, and it was something along the lines of a great way to come up with a paper is to just find an institution or some common occurrence that seems inexplicable using rational choice theory, right? It's something that people just think, why does this exist? There should be no reason that it exists, and then come up with a rational explanation for it. And so I started thinking in my head, what's the most messed up institution I can think of? And I thought of the caste, right? I naturally thought of the caste because my dad's from India. Um, and so I started thinking, and I noticed, or I realized, that India has arguably the most developed caste system in the world, and that subcontinent has been invaded and occupied by more often and by different entities than most of the world as well. And so I thought there could be a connection there. And so the high level, the thesis is places that are invaded by foreign occupiers or that have some internal strife, some internal power vacuum, those places are more likely to develop a caste system, because a caste system's primary purpose is not religious, but a tool, a public choice tool for those in power to uh, kind of maintain administrative and political control over a large population. Oh yes, they write a few stuff together too. They write they've written quite a bit of stuff together. Oh, lad is it is. Particularly the immigration system. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh please, please. I'm actually teaching. I'm teaching out of that book this coming week. Open Borders. I have the book. I have the book. I have the book right here. Actually, let me. Yeah. Uh. Well, let me turn my screen. I guess. Yeah. Right there. Yep. Saturday morning breakfast cereal. Yeah, or Sunday morning. I forget. Yeah. Exactly. Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's where I got my undergrad. Yep. Okay. Cool. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I love chai. Yeah. I love chai. Yeah, no, I mean it's but I mean safely, of course. And while you're thinking about solving the problems of the world, be sure to watch out for other cars. I actually cite one of them, his Gypsy Law paper. He talks about Gypsy Law and gypsies. They have kind of like it's not really a caste system, but they I mean they try to distinguish themselves from outsiders, right? And they use some of the same tools that are used in caste systems, like these notions of purity and pollution. And interestingly enough, those tools were used in like Jim Crow era USA too to differentiate between different peoples. So yeah, there's that one. I mean, he talks about all kinds of stuff. He talks about like human sacrifice. He explains witch trials, uh, blood feuds. That's a fun one. Yeah, he does do the infallibility of the Pope. He explains. Oh yeah, ordeals. Yeah, he talks about that too. Yeah. And I think that, and in and all his papers have very simple names. I think that one's just called ordeals. Yeah, witch trials. Yeah, the Gypsy Law one's just called that Gypsy Law. And so, if I really wanted to follow Leeson's advice, I would have just called this cast. Okay. Well, so when you create a caste system, so the caste system as it's been used throughout Indian history, it's been used to kind of curry out favors to certain groups within the population, certain individuals in the population, and it kind of gets them on your side, right? I use this phrase in the paper. It's like it allows them to pursue a strategy of divide and conquer, right? We get this group of people who are locals, right, and we're not on our side. And if it's the case of internal strife, you might be a local, but you still need to get people on your side, right? And so you use this cast. The Another incentive to use cast to do this is it allows you to very neatly sort um, groups who you think are more likely to rebel against you, and the British used it for that very purposefully uh, during the um, during the 19th century after it was called the Sepoy Mutiny. Um, and so yeah, uh, it one kind of really clear manifestation of that was when the Mughals invaded India. They were the Muslim invaders before the British came, a couple centuries before the British came. And when they came, a lot of higher caste Hindus immediately converted to Islam, and then they began administrating taxes for those Muslim invaders. Right? Yeah. So And so I guess one incentive. So I mean, I got this question during the review. One incentive for using caste, because the reviewer asked, well, why use caste? Why not use language or religion or something, or geographic area? But if you look at India, um, you could use language or geographic area or religion. But if you did that, you would the categories by which you could differentiate people would be much more coarse, right? You could, put Sikhs in this group, Hindus in this group, Christians in that group. You could put like Punjab in this group, um, Gujarat in this group. But say, you wanted to kind of fine tune it a little bit more. You wanted to have a more centralized caste system that had more groupings in it, more fine groupings in it. Uh, and you went to Punjab, a lot of so like geographic area is correlated in India with religion. So Punjabis are mostly Sikh; they mostly speak Punjabi. So you could divide these areas, but they would be coarse areas. And once you got into Punjab, how would you divide it more? Caste lets you do that. I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous throughout India, and I that's one of the points I make in my paper. It's funny because I this is for a religious issue of Cosmos and Taxis, but I make the explicit argument that caste isn't a religious institution. It's largely thought of as a religious institution, but and one of my arguments is every major religion in India has practiced caste before, including Christians. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I did too. I mean, and I think that that's the only contribution that I'd be willing to make because I don't like just relying on religious explanations to explain things. That seems kind of like a cop out. Like what? So what? And it just begs the question, right? Why did this religion choose to you know come up with this weird institution, right? Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think it's the closest one, right? I think it's the closest one. uh, you have, and so I should have done this earlier, but when I define caste, I define it pretty explicitly too. It's a system that's characterized by hereditary transmission of occupation, um, endogamy, so low social mobility, like you're born into this caste, and so those are the relationships. I mean, those are the specific characteristics of caste I'm trying to explain. It's such a pervasive institution. It's such a long-standing institution that it has too many characteristics for me to explain in one paper. But those are the characteristics. Those are the mechanisms by which I think caste is used to subjugate populations. Right, forced endogamy, forced hereditary transmission of occupation, and you see that in Jim Crow laws between black people and white people, right? Black people were forced into certain occupations. They were certainly born into it, right? I mean, they couldn't, they weren't allowed to. Interracial marriage was outlawed explicitly. So yeah, I think that's definitely the closest analog, and that's why I don't just focus on foreign invaders. I mean, when you have internal strife, when you have an internal um, when the government has a group that it considers an internal enemy, it has an incentive to institutionalize uh, caste like mechanisms to control them. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and beyond that, you're getting, by doing that, you're able to kind of give certain groups targeted incentives and like get them to buy into the system, right? I mentioned the high caste Hindus converting to Islam, um, and it's funny because a lot of scholars used to argue that it was the low caste Hindus that were converting to Islam to because they were, tired of their high caste Hindu oppressors. But that was a claim that was debunked eventually, and we found that really it was the high caste Hindus that were converting so that they could, one, escape taxes, and two, basically maintain like as close to a power structure as they could while still being invaded, right? I mean, they were still basically on top. They just had to answer to, you know, the Mughal rulers. Oh yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So I actually mentioned, I have a whole section of the paper where I so the first part of the paper is kind of like, let's look at the most common let's look at the most known one, and its progression throughout history. Because the cool thing about the Indian caste system is it's always seen as this very strict hierarchical order that doesn't change and doesn't budge, but it throughout India's history, it's had episodes of waxing and waning that give us very good variation to take advantage of, right? And not only that, we have a variety of caste systems throughout the world. So I mentioned Japan had a very similar caste system with four different castes too, just like India's, and also untouchable that were called Eta. And again, this also caused me to kind of rethink my claim that it was only when invading powers came in, because Japan during the 1600s, I'm sorry, the 16th century, they had civil strife, right? Just all constant civil wars between the different fiefs, the different the different samurai clans, and this low caste individual named Hideyoshi Toyotomi rose to power, and he became the shogun of Japan. And he died of natural causes, and his one of his higher I don't know if they were called captains or but a higher ranking uh, guy when his administration rose to power, named Ieyasu Tokugawa, and he instituted a caste system after he basically consolidated power in 1600 1601 for the express purpose of, I don't want low caste people doing what Hideyoshi Toyotomi did, and ousting me from power. They had a caste system in South Korea too, um, and so one of your questions was, can we identify common themes? And so I think there's a common theme in all of these. So in the South Korean case, um, it was also after internal strife they instituted a caste system. That one I know a little bit less about, but we clearly see that in the Japanese case. We clearly see it in the American case. And so, ways to avoid it, um, it can be such a strong institution that sometimes it might be hard to avoid, right? And I emphasize in the paper that my theory of caste is not a monocausal theory. It can There's other theories of caste, and my theory can operate in tandem with those other theories. Um, Specifically, there's another theory, and it's more traditionally economic than mine, even. And this author talks about caste as a means of contract enforcement in institutionally insecure environments where the state doesn't offer very secure means of contract enforcement, right? And so I guess the best way to avoid it is a strong institutions, right? Strong economic institutions, strong political institutions. Um, Obviously avoid invading people, right? Like, I think colonialism was really bad for the caste. It definitely strengthened it. And in fact, if if colonialism hadn't happened in India, we would think very differently of the caste than we do right now. Because the modern day caste system, the way we think about it, is largely an invention of the British. Because even the Mughals, the way they used caste was not nearly as centralized and as harsh as the way the British used it. The British used it to squash a mutiny and a rebellion and to keep another one from happening. The Mughals used it to administer taxes, right? Hmm. Hmm. And you got to ask yourself, who has an incentive to enforce those contracts and norms? It's the people in the privileged positions. And so I've had people ask me, why does the, I mean, if this theory is correct, because, I've told this theory to other people and they're like, if that's right, then we shouldn't have a caste system in India. That's not true. That's not true at all. There were people that definitely benefited up from it and they want to keep benefiting from it. And so, and actually it was outright. I mean, it was legally banned in India in 1950, 2 to 3 years after the British left, right? So it was banned immediately, but you have to think about de facto and de jure laws. You can ban something de facto, but you have these people who have been subjected to a caste system for millennium, and like with different degrees of rigidity. You know what I mean? So it's not going to disappear. Hmm. Certainly, certainly. Oh yeah, red line laws and you mentioned two-party systems. Are you familiar with Duverger's law? So Duverger's law, the reason we have a two-party system is because we have a first past the post system, and when you have a first past the post system, mathematically you're gonna find yourself with two competing parties because you got to get. And yeah, yeah, and so and when you have more proportional representation type system, then you're gonna come up with more parties. And so in Mississippi, my home state, they had first past the post at large voting on purpose to make it more difficult for Black people to get into office, right? And we still have those systems in place, and that's not why they're in place now. But when they were, I mean, when they were voted on and institutionalized, those were the reasons, and that wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of people, I have some friends when I tell them I'm into public choice and that it's my specialty. They ask me, how are we going to get rid of our two-party system? And I say, we're not until we start changing our voting laws. We're not. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Well, that's not going to happen because of the secret ballot, right? Like there's no contract enforcement there's no effective contract enforcement that we could create because of the secret ballot. Because it does happen at the federal level because those votes are published, right? That's log rolling for you, Yeah. I ask my students that all the time. I say, I'll take money to vote a certain way if y'all want. Like, who's down? You And how would you know? Yeah. You can't follow me in that voting booth, so it's free money. You know what I'm saying? I don't even have to sacrifice my ideals, and that's the point, right? Yeah, yeah, they're called Brahmins. So in the Hindu caste system, you have Brahmins, you have Kshatriyas, which were like the warriors, and then you have like Vaishnus, and then yeah. Oh, that yeah. Mhm. And I didn't talk about concentrated interest and diffuse cost. It would have been a great thing to talk about. Every time I write a paper, I always look back on it. I'm like, damn, I really could have added that in there. But well, so what I did talk about was the cast was a way to decentralize, um, like it was a way to kind of decentralize administrative control, right? Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. So just avoiding well, so okay, when you say our risk, we're not at much of a risk of a caste system as a more yeah. Uh um I don't know. I mean, so first we're a very developed country, right? Um and if anything, we're moving further away from a caste system. I mean, I definitely think Jim Crow was a caste system by my definition. I mean, it was a mild caste system. It was caste light, but it was still caste. Um, but we're moving away from that. I mean, so I talk about at the end about how if caste system is also a means of contract enforcement, along with my theory, uh, you know, caste, according to along my theory, it ended in 1950 in India, but there's still special interests that are still getting special favors. One really weird dynamic in India. India has uh, one of the most complex affirmative action programs in the world, right? And yeah, it's a very complex affirmative action program designed to help low caste Hindus, and people take advantage of it. And here's the thing: like with our affirmative action programs, people can tell very clearly that I'm not black. And actually, I mean, I've and it's funny because I'm 25% Indian, and so I apply for some minority scholarships, and I've had family members apply, and like people are like, don't they don't believe us, but uh, in India with the caste system, there's nothing outside that can tell you, okay, this person's not that caste or that caste, right? And so people could take a lot more advantage of it, and I think that's something that kind of partially keeps the caste system going is these affirmative action programs. Maybe that's an unintended consequence of them. I mean, I understand they have a very good intended goal, but at the same time, it really just reinforces these differences, right? These caste differences. Um, maybe because it's harder to call out when you're discriminating against someone, maybe. And mhm, mhm, yeah. Chris Coyne has a really good paper on that. So he talks about, I forget what it's called, but it's about the uh, the professional league baseball teams who got black players first. They were the ones that were most likely already to have a shot at the World Series, right? And so the ones who didn't have a shot anyway, they could afford, quote unquote, to be racist because we're not going to go anyway, and we can give our fans what they want, which is an all white team, unfortunately. Um, yeah, and so places like the New York Yankees were the first to integrate. No, man, I unfortunately, but I bet if we just, we have Google skills. I bet if we just look up Chris Coyne baseball paper, let me see. Put me in, coach. That's what it's called. It's a great title. I can't believe I forgot the title because it's an amazing title. Put me in, coach. Yeah, yeah. I'm actually proud of this name, shooting an elephant. It at least has shock value. Well, so the elephant is India, right? The elephant's India. Uh, No, it's not an obesity joke. Elephants are quite common in India. Elephants are quite common in India. And actually, this is from so the quote that I have up here. You said you wanted to talk about this at some point, and I did. I mean, it's kind of a cryptic quote that I put at the beginning of this, and it's hard to tie to the rest of the paper. And that was on purpose. I wanted kind of something cryptic. But George Orwell, he did some time in the British Army in India, and I think this is based on a yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think this story is based on a true story. Basically, they have a I forget what they call it, but sometimes elephants just go mad. Something like they go into heat, like these male elephants, and they'll start rampaging and just killing people. They get overly aggressive, and they had a problem with that elephant, and they'll snap out of it sometimes. And they had an elephant do that in a village, and they got George Orwell. They were like, you need to take this elephant out for us. And by the time he got there in this story, the elephant had already calmed down, but he had all these Indians behind him, like yelling, "Shoot it, shoot it!" And so he shot it, and it took multiple shots to kill him. And kind of in this story, the elephant is kind of um, a metaphor for India, and the whole story is kind of a metaphor for colonization in general. Like um, he didn't want to shoot the elephant, but he had to because there were all these like outside forces like kind of driving him. And for me, the caste system's been used throughout Indian history to just methodically subjugate that population. And that's what he did to this elephant. He methodically subjugated it bullet by bullet. Um, and it was slow, it was painful, it was agonizing, and that's what the caste system is. And that's kind of what I wanted to I'm a little artistic and there's not enough of that in economics, so I kind of wanted to put a little artistic flair into this paper. So the name of the paper is Shooting an Elephant. Yeah. And it's a super short story. I mean, it would take you 10 minutes to read. I definitely recommend you reading it, because I probably just butchered the summary. Um, but yeah, I mean, he even says in this quote, he says one could have imagined him thousands of years old. The elephant's India in this poem, or in this short story, right? So I think so. I mean, I mean, if you look at the dying out of the caste system in India, because it is dying out. It is slowly dying out. But if you look at it, the people who are most likely to adhere to caste, to take caste seriously, are the older people, the more conservative people, the less cosmopolitan people, and then the opposite. You look at the younger generation who are moving to the U.S. or elsewhere. They don't take caste seriously at all, right? It's almost a non-factor. Um, Now that doesn't mean that it's not still a problem, right? And sometimes these Indians, they import notions of caste with them when they migrate. There was this crazy story back home in Mississippi, because there's a lot there's a huge Punjabi population in Jackson, uh, like especially relative to what you would think would be a normal Punjabi population in Jackson, Mississippi, right? Yeah. So there was this guy in the news. His son married a black woman, and she was pregnant, and they were from a high caste, and he didn't think that was appropriate for his high caste son to do, and so he hired a hit on the and had her killed, and he's in prison now. But yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, so, but then again, this guy was an older guy, and look, his son obviously did not care about caste, right? And so a lot of this, it has become almost a generational issue, especially in India, right? Um, and it's almost like that in the U.S., right? I mean, people who are a little bit younger I think, paid less attention to race. Um, and I think I think it's a good thing to an extent that people are worried about caste making a resurgence in the U.S., whatever that may look like, uh, because I think that's a sign that it's probably not going to. Right? If we're this concerned about it, I think that's a good thing to an extent, right? To an extent. Yeah, I think when you get wealthier, the opportunity cost of participating in that kind of horrid institution goes down or goes up, right? I think as you develop, as women receive like more market opportunities, yeah, I think that's what's pulling people out of this caste system, out of this mentality. And even so, like that social contract, or not social contract, that contract enforcement theory of the caste that I was talking about. Uh, I think the author of that paper is Freitas. Um, uh, uh, we should expect, as economies develop, as they become more market economies, we shouldn't need those kind of weird methods of contract enforcement anymore, because it seems like a very inefficient means of contract enforcement. There seem like there are a lot more better means of enforcing contracts and making sure people stick to their promises, right? So yeah, yeah. Uh, Psychologically too, man. I mean, you just ruined your relationship with your son, even if you didn't go to jail, right? Even if he was found not guilty, the son would know. You know what I'm saying? You like in order to hit on my wife, killed his own grandkid too. You know, so I mean, it's really sad. What like, I mean, there's another like, there's a I think it's still on Netflix called Daughter of India about um a woman basically who was like dragged onto a bus and raped by a bunch of people and she died and the takeaway from that movie at the end was like, look, this happens to all kinds of women, and we know about this one because she was in a high caste. She was going to be a doctor, and people actually cared about what happened to her. But this happens to low caste women all the time, and nobody bats an eye. And yeah, it's a problem, man. Hmm. 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 They call them social remittances. There's a whole literature for them. Yeah. Hmm. Deep determinants of institutions, right? Like the deep determinants of institutions. Yeah. Okay, maybe, yeah, but he looks at more long run causation factors, involved with like institutions, and he talks about immigrants importing bad institutions, right? Okay, okay. Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Now, of course, a polycentric system is not intelligently designed, though. It's a, it's a product of yeah, because there's this whole because there's this whole idea that the market is a product of human action, but not human design. Language is like that. The caste system was very much like that too. That's true. That's true. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's my own fault. Yeah, I get caught up in the jargon sometimes. So polycentricity is what is polycentricity? That's a great question. It's kind of super decentralized government, right? It's government at multiple levels. We can think of like Wagner's concept of entangled political economy. You brought up robust political economy earlier, but Wagner talks about entangled political economy, where we have like public and private entities who we accept are inherently connected and intertwined, and they work together all the time. And sometimes they're the same people, just in different contexts. Um, and so Eleanor Ostrom, that's another really, really important shout out, especially if we're talking about polycentricity. Um, her and Vincent Ostrom, right? They were leading figures who talked about polycentricity. I think Eleanor's Well, okay, so until very recently, she was the only woman to have won a Nobel Prize. That's changed, but she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and she wasn't even an economist by trade, which is pretty awesome to me. Uh, but yeah, I mean, do you think I'm characterizing it right? It's kind of a weird term that we take for granted sometimes. I mean, but yeah, it's like super decentralized political decision making, um, bottom up political decision making, right? Instead of top down political decision making. Federalism is polycentric. It's multiple levels of government for sure. It's definitely characterized by multiple levels of government, multiple government departments, overlapping government functions. That was a big thing of hers. Is like the people who wanted to centralize government. They talked about redundancy, and she noted that okay, if we're repeating some of the same government functions, we might have redundancy, but we also get competition, and that should increase efficiency. No, it's not. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and even if you look at the world is a polycentric order, very much so. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot for having me, man. It's fun talking about it.